In the final years of the Qing dynasty, the imperial court extensively enlisted Western advisors to cope with the great calamities that had befallen China. Despite the differences between Chinese and Western cultures, there were a great number of Western individuals who privately committed themselves to join those Chinese dedicated to stem the tide of decline. Notable among them were the American nationals Frederick Townsend and Anson Burlingame, and the British nationals Charles George Gordon and Robert Hart. Their names were recorded for posterity in the draft history of Qing. As Confucius instructed, the ruler employs his ministers with propriety. The ministers serve their ruler with loyalty. This principle was upheld across generations by Chinese scholar officials, and likewise validated by certain Western advisors. These Western advisors, who long admired classical Chinese culture, were motivated by genuine interest and respect, culminating in personal actions deemed righteous and honorable, magnanimously rendering assistance to support China. The appreciation of classical Chinese culture was the wellspring of such commitment. Surveying the barely visible traces of classical Chinese culture today, there is little left to inspire admiration from the West, and little left to sustain and bolster the Chinese themselves. The last Qing Emperor Pu Yi abdicated shortly after the founding of the Republic of China. Yet, the Forbidden City continued as a piece of imperial property. In late November, the 7th year of the Republic, 1918, the British national Reginald Fleming Johnston was appointed English tutor to the former Qing Emperor Pu Yi. The following year, in the 8th year of the Republic, 1919, Johnston met Pu Yi for the first time in the Forbidden City. Pu Yi was 13 years old then. Johnston chronicled this meeting in his work, Twilight in the Forbidden City. He wrote, "He was dressed for the occasion in court dress and was attended by a number of functionaries in uniform. On being conducted into the audience chamber, I advanced towards the emperor and bowed 3 times. He then descended from his seat, walked up to me, and shook hands in European fashion. He remained standing during the rest of this short interview and asked me a few conventional questions, mainly about my official career in China. When the interview was over, I withdrew to a waiting room and was informed that the emperor wished to begin his English lessons immediately and would receive me again in a less formal manner as soon as he had changed his clothes." The year Reginald Johnston was appointed tutor to the emperor, he had not only lived in China for almost 20 years, he was also serving as the British district officer and colonial magistrate of Weihai. His writings were widely known at the time. His publications included From Peking to Mandalay, a journey from North China to Burma through Tibetan Sichuan and Yunnan, published in the 34th year of the Bongshu reign, 1908. Lion and Dragon in Northern China, published in the 2nd year of the Xuantong reign, 1910. A Chinese Appeal to Christendom concerning Christian missions, written under the pseudonym of Ling Shaoyang, published in the 3rd year of the Xuantong reign, 1911. Buddhist China, published in the 7th year of the Republic of China, 1918. Many of Johnston's writings were sympathetic to China's position, and for this reason, he formed close friendships with China's scholar officials. His appointment of imperial tutor was recommended by Ching-Mai, 1876 to 1940, the third son of Li Hongzhang, 1823 to 1901. Reginald Johnston was born on 31st October 1874 and died on 6 March 1938 at the age of 63. A native of Edinburgh, Scotland, he was educated at the University of Edinburgh and later at Magdalen College, University of Oxford. In 1898, he was posted to Hong Kong by the British Colonial Office. In 1906, he was posted to Weihai Wei in Shandong Province. In 1919, he was appointed imperial tutor. In 1924, after Puyi was expelled from the Forbidden City, Johnston became secretary to the Sino-British Indemnity Commission. From 1927 to 1930, he was promoted to Commissioner of Weihai Wei. On 1st October 1930, when Weihai Wei was returned to China by the British government, Johnston's official career came to an end. In the same year, he returned to Britain, having lived in China for a total of 33 years. In 1931, he was appointed Professor of Chinese Studies at the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. His personal library of 16,000 volumes were later all donated to the SOAS Library. The bookplate with the design of the 5 sacred mountains is a distinct feature of the Johnston collection. Johnston possessed a deep understanding of Chinese culture. He was exceptionally perceptive of the teacher-student relationship, a central pillar of Confucian ethics that even emperors were bound to observe with due reverence. He explained this in Twilight in the Forbidden City. It has always been the custom in China for the ruler to sit enthroned with his back to the north, facing the south. Those who approach him, therefore, must face the north. This marks the distinction between ruler and subject. But this relationship of ruler and subject is not the relationship of teacher and pupil. Therefore, the teacher, when addressing a ruler who is also his pupil, is not expected to assume the usual attitude. The interesting point is that this ancient rule was observed to the last in the imperial schoolroom. At his studies, the emperor sat at the north side of a square table, facing south. The place assigned to the tutor was a seat at the east side of the table, facing west. That was my own position during all my formal interviews with the emperor in the Yuqing Palace. Another mark of respect shown by the emperor to each of his tutors, even the barbarian from overseas, was to rise when the tutor entered the room. The tutor advanced to the middle of the room, bowed once, and emperor and tutor then sat down simultaneously in their proper places. If the tutor, in the course of the lesson hours, had occasion to rise for the purpose of fetching a book from a shelf or for any other reason, the emperor rose too and remained standing till the tutor returned to his place. There is much to be said that is common to Chinese and Western cultures. Living through a time of epochal transition in China, Johnston frequently judged men by the standards of loyalty and integrity. The passage on Ching-Mai reads, "During the critical days of the revolution in 1911, he found refuge in the British leased territory of Weihai Wei, where I was then district officer and magistrate. In happier days, under the monarchy, Lord Li had served his country as Chinese minister at the court of Vienna. When Prince Dai Tao a brother of the Emperor Dezong, visited Germany as head of a military mission shortly before the revolution. He was accompanied by Lord Li. Since then, he has steadfastly refused all offers of official employment under the Republic, though he was repeatedly pressed by his friend President Xu Sichang to accept a high diplomatic post. He and his family have always remained loyal to the old dynasty, and it was mainly through his influence, both with the president and with the Manchu court, that the appointment of English tutor to the emperor was offered to me. Pu Yi also studied under other tutors, including the Guangdong Hanling academician Liang Ting-fen, 1859 to 1919, the Fujian Hanling academician Chen Pao-ch'en, 1848 to 1935, the Jiangxi Hanling academician Zhu Yifan, 1867 to 1937, and the Manchu Hanling academician Yi Ke-tan, 1862 to 1922. In March of the 8th year of the Republic, 1919, when Johnston joined the palace, he knew of Liang Ting-fen only by reputation, for Liang was already gravely ill with scant chance of recovery. On 14th November that year, Liang died in the capital. Johnston deeply admired the loyalty and integrity of Liang Ting-fen and wrote of him in considerable detail. I must now give some account of my colleagues in the imperial schoolroom. When I first entered the Forbidden City in 1919, they were 4 in number, 3 being Chinese and 1 a Manchu. The first to be mentioned is one whom I never met. He was a very sick man, half paralyzed when I arrived, and he died towards the end of the year. He was a Cantonese named Liang Ting-fen. His father, who was a government official and brought him up well, emphasized the importance of self-discipline and self-respect, and impressed his mind with the principle that if ever the choice lay between death and disgrace, he should choose the former. Perhaps he had this parental counsel in his mind when the testing time came in the summer of 1917. At the time of his death, I heard his colleagues in the palace speak of the courage and loyalty displayed by him at the time of the Restoration episode. Some of the fighting between Zhang Xun's troops and those of Duan Qirui took place in the immediate vicinity of the Forbidden City. When fighting was going on in that locality, the hour came for Liang Ting-fen's usual attendance on his imperial pupil. To reach the palace gates, he had to drive in his pony carriage through streets thronged with undisciplined soldiers. He refused to remain at home or to turn back when the danger was pointed out to him. On his arrival at the great gates opposite the Coal Hill, he found his official sedan chair awaiting him as usual. But the bearers earnestly advised him not to go into the palace, as the opposing forces were exchanging shots over the palace roofs, and it was perilous to cross the open courtyards. Stepping out of his carriage and seating himself in his chair, he ordered the bearers to take him forthwith to the Yuqing Palace. They obeyed with evident reluctance, thinking no doubt of their own safety as well as his, and they had gone only a little way when rifle bullets struck a wall alongside which they were passing and a shower of fragments of brick and plaster struck the chair. The bearers begged him to let them carry him into one of the side buildings to take cover till the firing was over. 不可误差事，不可误差事. My duty is not to be neglected. My duty is not to be neglected, was all he replied. And they had the courage to obey him. It would have been a disgrace worse than death if through seeking safety for his own person, he had failed to keep his appointment with his imperial master and pupil. We may surmise that not much was done that day in the way of lessons, but not through failure on the part of the imperial tutor to present himself at the usual hour. Johnston's avocation of loyalty and integrity was not just consigned to empty words. His own conduct reinforced those values and was worthy of commendation. In the 23rd year of the Republic, 1934, Twilight in the Forbidden City was published in London, and the dedication on the first page reads, To His Majesty, the Emperor Puyi, in memory of a happy relationship begun 15 years ago in the Forbidden City, and in the earnest hope that, after the passing of the twilight and the long night, the dawn of a new and happier day for himself, and also for his people on both sides of the Great Wall, is now breaking. This book is dedicated by his faithful and affectionate servant and tutor, Reginald F. Johnston. Puyi wrote a short foreword which reads, In the 10th month of Jiazi year, I left the government palace, Forbidden City, and entered the Japanese legation. My tutor, Johnston, was the first to protect me from danger. Moreover, he first visited the Japanese minister Yoshizawa to speak on my behalf. Yoshizawa thereupon courteously granted me refuge at the legation to avoid the mutinous troops. In the 2nd month of Yichou year, I moved to Tianjin. It has now been 7 years. Johnston accompanied me in between Peking and Tianjin for approximately 13 years. During this period of peril and panic, dislocation and uncertainty, only Johnston is knowledgeable of the full picture. Now he is able to write and chronicle this experience, most of which is unknown to others. Alas, in the aftermath of turmoil and disaster, to obtain such a true account based on personal witness and lived experience, how precious it is indeed. Johnston's powerful writing and lofty conduct are even beyond the reach of China's Confucian scholars. Once this book is published, I know it will be valued. Written in the 9th month of Xing-Wei year. The year Xing-Wei corresponds to 1931. Thus, 3 years before the publication of Twilight in the Forbidden City, Puyi had already written the foreword, indicating that Johnston had devoted several years writing the book. When it was finally published in 1934, it had been 22 years since the founding of the Republic of China. By then, both Chinese and foreigners were competing to align themselves and curry favors with the new leaders of China. Johnston alone remained mindful of the former dynasty, his sentiments no less steadfast than those Chinese loyalists of the Qing dynasty. In my collection, there's a letter by Johnston to Mrs. Howell regarding a tea party to be hosted by Puyi. It was dated 1st February 1926, when Puyi was living in Tianjin after being expelled from the Forbidden City. The letter reads, 1st February 1926. Dear Mrs. Howell, I am dreadfully sorry to say that tomorrow's tea party must be postponed, as the Emperor has influenza and will be unable to come. I am going to Peking in a day or two and hope to have the party on my return. Will you please tell your husband that I have ascertained that he is correct in believing that Ong Tong-he, the imperial tutor, was also known for literary purposes as Gu Su Song Can Lao Ren. But Mr. Chen Pao-ch'en, my informant, does not know whether he was also known as Gu Su Xiao Hua Zu Ren. Yours sincerely, R.F. Johnston. One may venture to conjecture the identity of Mrs. Howell. At that time, the commissioner of the Tianjin Office of Chinese Maritime Customs Service was the British national Edward Butts Howell, 1879 to 1952, a botanist, translator, and sinologist. His translation work is titled The Inconstancy of Madame Zhuang and Other Stories from the Chinese, published in 1924. This is a translation of selected chapters from Jing Gu Qi Guan, Strange Tales, Old and New. The name of Gu Su Xiao Hua Zu Ren, referred in the letter, appears as the author of a foreword in Jing Gu Qi Guan. It is therefore very likely that Howell inquired about the identity of the author, and Johnston replied in writing to his wife. In 1934, Johnston purchased an island named Eilean Rye in Scotland. In 1937, when his academic appointment came to an end, he moved there for retirement. Eilean Rye is Scottish Gaelic, meaning King's Island. The island covers 86 hectares, or 860,000 square meters, and lies some 300 meters offshore. It was an uninhabited and desolate place. It is said that Johnston built a Buddhist shrine and laid out a Chinese garden there, employed Chinese servants, and raised the imperial flag of Manchu Kuo every day to convey his attachment to the Qing court. There is another letter in my collection by Johnston to an American named Mrs. Rudd. It was dated 4th January 1938, when he was already living in Eilean Rye. On the letterhead, the full address of Eilean Rye was printed on the upper right corner. Eilean Rye, Loch Craignish, Kilmartin, Argyll. The letter reads, January 4th, 1938. Dear Mrs. Rudd, a few days after I had posted my recent letter to you, I received a very kind letter from your friend, Mrs. Nichols. Unfortunately, I seem to have mislaid her address in the States, and as her letter does not give the address, I cannot send her an acknowledgement. I shall be very grateful if, when you have an opportunity, you will let her know how much I appreciate her letter and good wishes. Yours very sincerely, Reginald F. Johnston. The address on the envelope is Mrs. Rudd, Story House, 312 Humphrey Street, Swampscott, Massachusetts, USA. Upon checking Mrs. Rudd's address in Massachusetts, the house she lived in still stands today. It is a 3-story 19th century American-style building. The full name of Mrs. Rudd was Mabel Ward Rudd, 1877 to 1958, and her husband was Frederick J. Rudd, 1880 to 1960. Mrs. Rudd was a poetess. Her works include To the Blue Bird, published in 1924, and Cornelius to Mary Gay, published in 1934. Johnston's letter to Mrs. Rudd was written on 4th January 1938. A mere 54 days later, on 6 March, Johnston died from illness. On 20th February, he underwent surgery at a hospital in Edinburgh for the removal of kidney stones. Complications ensued, and the condition proved fatal. This letter may well be his final written words to have survived. After Reginald Johnston's death, his fiancée Elizabeth Sparshot quickly burned all his manuscripts. The hidden stories and intricacies of many historic figures and events were reduced to ashes and smoke. How can one not feel profound regret? For the same reason, it is rare to come across any of his writing on paper. Had Johnston not died when he did, but instead lived to witness from afar China's war of resistance against Japanese aggression, a final victory, subsequent fall of mainland China to the communists, the Cultural Revolution, and Puyi being a political puppet for 35 years, while classical Chinese culture itself dissipated like a dream. The measure of his sorrows and reflections would likely have been beyond the comprehension of most people, not even just a fraction.